we have this false impression or this like story we tell ourselves that, oh, if I make that amount of money, I'm going to feel safe. Or if I have this relationship, then I'm going to feel security. Or if I have that, then I will feel. But the thing is, those things don't give you those things. And so that's why you left disappointed. But what if you can actually acknowledge, okay, how do I feel freedom right now? How do I really feel safe?
Hi everyone, today we have Alyssa here who's built her own lifestyle business that allows her to travel whenever she loves to, and I would love to introduce you to her to share about her story. Thank you so much, Alyssa, for being here with us today. Please tell us like what you do.
So I'm a yoga teacher, a transformation coach, and I'm also a business mentor for wellness entrepreneurs. So it actually goes back around 8 years ago when I first became a Pilates instructor. I was building my business, but I was very burnt out and exhausted. And so after building that for a few years, I kind of thought, oh, maybe instructors just don't make a lot of money, and you kind of question whether you took this right path. And then I became a yoga instructor. Didn't make a whole lot of money. I think I was making around $2,000 a month, and I was kind of struggling. And after 4 years of that, I kind of went into corporate for 2 years. And then I decided the corporate life wasn't for me. And then I had to come out of it. And only just last year, I decided I had to launch my dream business. The entrepreneurial in me was just like wanting to come out. And then, yeah, here I am 1 year later, building my dream business, traveling, living the lifestyle that I really always wanted, and doing what I'm really passionate about.
That's so cool. So can you tell us what that year in your life has looked like so far?
I think one of the things that I came to a conclusion was to realize that, I had to build a business that actually feels aligned for me, and it would look different for every single person because everyone has different values. And for me, freedom was a huge thing. Fun and freedom was a huge value of mine. And so the past year, I've very deliberately mixed work and play together to make sure that I was building a business that allowed me to have a lot of freedom and fun at the same time. So I've traveled a lot and I work a lot as well. Sometimes I feel like a workaholic because when people are watching Netflix, I'm like, Netflix is boring, I want to work. And then so I will have friends who constantly tell me, oh, you should probably work less. But to me, because work and play is so, interchangeable in some ways, that to me, work was just so enjoyable. And so I guess that's how work has looked like for me in the past year, where I just really enjoy it. And I get to travel, spend time with people I love, have fun and do things that I love.
So for someone who is curious about what a week in your life looks like, can you share with us what that looks like, just so they can, if they want to live a similar lifestyle, how that would pan out?
Yeah. So for me, because I'm a yoga and Pilates instructor as well, so I do teach throughout the week. But I also know how many classes I can teach before I start getting exhausted. And it's very important to kind of know, at which point will you start to not enjoy what you're doing, and to cap it at that. Because if you push past that, then you start to burn yourself out. And so for me, I teach, Monday and Fridays only for yoga, and I really enjoy that. I love doing it. And then throughout the week, I take only one coaching call a week now. I used to do multiple coaching calls last year, but I realized that too many calls would exhaust me as well. And so it's just really finding that balance. And so this year, I only do one group call a week. And the rest of the time, I just make content. So I love making content, and I just allow myself to kind of wake up and see what I feel like doing, and then whatever sparks joy. And I use content to drive business and sell products and resources online as well.
What kind of products and resources are you selling at the moment?
So at the moment, I've got self-paced courses that people can do for wellness entrepreneurs, like instructors or nutritionists or people in the wellness industry who want to launch their own program. And so I've got a self-paced program that people can buy. I also have resources for people to learn how to create new clients, how to make sales. But I also have a group program that I mentor every single week, where people can hop on and ask me questions about business.
Which one do you find derives the most revenue for you at this point in time?
High ticket is always easier in the beginning because you only need a few sales to actually pay the bills, right? And so the goal seems a lot more realistic in the beginning, but as you want to build and create more passive income, you definitely want more resources that are probably lower ticket, that you can use content to just push out. Because also one thing is, the higher the ticket, sometimes just content itself is harder to nurture, because people who just, I guess, meet you online, it's harder for them to want to pay a few $1,000s or $10,000 for, like a course, or like to work with you one-on-one. But they might be interested in buying something that's $50 or $100 or $200 from your website, right? So I have a bit of both. And so I do have people who buys my lower ticket resources, but then those who I've nurtured for a longer period of time, or people who I've interacted with a little bit more, those are my higher ticket clients.
And how did you make the jump from corporate to doing what you love? Because that takes courage and a lot of clarity as well, to understand what you want.
Yeah.
out of your life.
Yeah, it's funny because like a lot of people spend their whole life in corporate and then moving out of that is so hard. But for me, I was only in corporate for 2 years, but that was still so hard to walk away from because I was always an entrepreneur before. And so I was so used to the inconsistent income, like some are good months, some are bad months. And for me to be in corporate and suddenly experience or have a taste of what regular income felt like was still so hard to walk away from because I'm like, I know exactly how much is going to come in the bank. It's so much easier to calculate or budget for. So I was kind of like, do I want to go back into that? But I knew, like, you know, deep down, you just trust your gut that you know it's the right next move for you. But to be honest, I think 1 year into corporate, I knew I had to go to leave. But I stayed there because it felt so comfortable. And I think it wasn't like if I didn't have my complete meltdown, I don't think I would have left yet. But I hit a point where I remember I was sitting in the bathroom and I was just like vomiting because I was so anxious and I just had a complete meltdown. And I remember calling my manager that day and I just couldn't talk. She was like asking, "Are you okay?" And I couldn't even talk. Like I was shaking. And then that's when I had a chat with her that week and she said, "I think it's time for you to leave." And then I said, "But I don't know, what would I do if I leave now? I haven't set up my business." And there's always this mentality that I need to have my side hustle ready. It has to make a certain amount of income before I can quit my job. But I remember being like, but I'm always so exhausted after my corporate job that when I get home, I don't feel like working on my business, right? And so there's this, I feel like so many people are always like, well, like, especially if you have a high income, like a high salary as well in corporate, it's so hard for your side hustle to match that in the beginning stages. And so it almost feels like it's impossible for you to quit your corporate job. But I remember my manager saying to me, and she was a good friend as well, and she said to me, if you leave, what's the worst case scenario for you? Because right now it's costing you your mental health, right? And so I said, well, worst case for me is I just find a part-time job that just pays the bills, and then I just work on my side hustle, right? And when I verbalized that and processed that, I was like, that doesn't sound that bad. Yeah. Like, you know, it actually isn't as bad as it sounds. And I mean, finding a part-time job that just pays the bills, but at least when I finish work, I really finish work. Whereas in corporate, when you finish work, you haven't really finished work, right? So like your mind is still racing, thinking about the project that you still need to work on, the deadlines and the KPIs that you need to hit. Whereas if you work in maybe retail or like maybe hospitality, you finish work, you might be physically a bit tired, but your mind space is still open for creativity. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs are creatives as well. And for myself, I didn't feel like making content and getting creative with that when I spent a whole day making content for another business, you know? So I think that was when I was like, okay, the worst case isn't so bad. I quit the next week. I quit the next week. And then from there, it was just like, okay, I'll just like pick up some yoga and Pilates classes to teach. And I was teaching around 5-6 days a week at that point because I was like, I just need to pay the bills for now. But then I would finish work after a few hours, teach a few hours, go home, and I'd have the whole day to work on my business. And I was like, wow, this feels so good. Like, you know, and from there, I just slowly cut down some classes as my business was growing. And I remember the third month, I made my 15K month and I was like, oh my goodness, this is crazy.
Gosh, that is so
like,
cool.
Yeah, and it was like when you have the creative space to build what you're really passionate about, the income is just a bonus that comes from it. And it wasn't even about the money. I remember after that month, I said to myself, I was starting to work a bit too much, and I actually started to dial it back a little bit because I wanted to make sure that I wasn't building another full-time job for myself, another corporate job for myself, you know, and then get caught back in that cycle again. So for me, it was like not about the money. The money is bonus, but making sure that I created a lifestyle that I actually enjoyed. Yeah.
Oh my god, I feel a bit teary hearing that. That is so cool. Oh my god. So you said you jumped into finding teaching classes in the beginning. Were there contacts that you already had, or was it you just went and cold called like different places to start these classes?
So for my classes, I did actually have people reach out previously wanting me to teach at places. And because I was working corporate, it was really hard to take those times that they wanted me to teach. So it was like from a few months ago. And so I reached out and they said, yeah, actually, we're still looking. And then I also reached out, you know, went online to see if people were hiring because keeping my options open all the time. And so I did quite a few interviews and they all were open to having me on board to teach some classes. And because I had a few people who was interested, I just had leverage to kind of like ask for specific like pay that I wanted and the times and hours that I wanted to work. I think it also helped that I did have some experience because I've taught, Pilates and yoga for around like 6 years, and then Pilates I've taught for like around 9 years already. So like
Wow.
that helped with that experience. But I was also open to working in a complete new industry as well because, like I said, the worst case scenario was work in a complete new industry, starting from scratch, but maybe working retail, hospitality, and I was okay with that. And just knowing that it was a season of my life that wasn't so focused on my job title, but more about what lifestyle I wanted to create for myself.
Okay. You worked in corporate for 2 years, and what was that like when you were in that place?
I think it was very difficult for me to begin with because I wasn't used to working with a team environment. I did a lot of contract work before as well. So I kind of fell into social media work and marketing because I was doing social media and marketing for my own business. And then so I started getting a lot of gigs and contract work. But doing contract work is very different because you kind of have more control over your own work and you submit it and then you check in with your clients and, they brief you again to see, like what to improve and work on. But working in a corporate environment meant that like there was so much less control, especially because there was head office as well who was also like checking in with all the work that I was doing. And so I had to learn a lot of soft skills that I probably didn't develop before. So I really appreciate the experience. I think it also taught me so much about social media and allowed me to test out a lot of strategies because obviously a business had more budget. When I was working for myself, there was less budget. And so throughout those 2 years, my boss was really good, always gave me like, that freedom and flexibility to test out different strategies with basically his money, right? And so I got to test out a lot of different strategies, which then later I could implement into my business and coaching. And because I found a lot of success in that and helping the company grow a lot through social media, when I left, I implemented a lot of those strategies that worked really well and used it in my coaching and mentoring as well, because I do mentor other wellness entrepreneurs to support them in growing their community and growing their business. And I think it wasn't that I didn't enjoy what I did. I enjoyed what I did in the company. It's just the product that I was promoting wasn't something I was passionate about. And so I could implement these new strategies in an area that I was passionate about. And so helping my clients find success in those strategies, made everything so worthwhile. So yeah.
And you're doing something that's aligned to your purpose.
Yeah, exactly.
Well. Yeah.
Like you want to wake up each day feeling like I'm really making an impact in an area that I actually care about. And that's what like gets you up. Every morning, like I wake up really early nowadays, even if I'm not teaching, because I'm actually excited. Like before I sleep, I'm thinking about all the ideas. And sometimes I would wake up and just before I sleep and write down all these ideas because I'm actually excited about what I do.
Wow, that's beautiful. And you said you picked up a lot of soft skills that you might not have learned if you went in corporate. What were they?
I think a lot of it has to do with like communication, the way you handle conflicts, the way you work with team. I think these are things that's really important. And sometimes as a solopreneur, it can be really easy for us to feel like we just want to take everything on ourselves and I don't need to care about what anyone else thinks. And it's true to some degree, but as you want to scale your business, you do need to have these skill sets to work with people and to scale and grow as well. So I think it's really important to learn these and not to feel like I need to do everything myself. I think that's a mentality that I tend to have as well. And I don't really know how to delegate tasks because I'm so used to, I can do it better. So why not I do everything myself? But that's really hard to scale and grow.
That's really beautiful. So although at the time in corporate wasn't what you wanted, you still learned some really great skills that you can use now and in the future to help you excel more in your business. Yeah. And so you shared that you also travel quite a bit, or at least definitely a lot more than you did before.
Yeah.
Can you share with us, where you've been and what those experiences have been like for you?
Yeah. So last year in November, I went on a Thailand retreat, a business retreat, and also did some solo traveling for the first time ever. I'm an extrovert, so I've always been like kind of not knowing whether solo traveling is for me. I always thought, what if I feel very lonely and whatnot? But, like lots of people encouraged me to just give it a shot. And so I did. And it's been such a healing experience. A lot of people also said that, you shouldn't invest into a business retreat because by that time I've invested a lot of money in courses and coaches at that point. And so last year I spent over $40,000 in like coaches, courses and retreats just to reinvest into myself. And a lot of people were like, why do you need that experience? And I think that sometimes you just need to trust your gut for what's really right for your season. And I knew that it was a big investment for myself, but I went anyways. And what I told myself my intention is to build connection and collaborations because I really wanted to surround myself with people who had the same mindset. And what better way than to do that through events, right? Because that's how you're going to connect with people who are like-minded. And that's where I actually met my friend Nicole, who then went on to collaborate and run retreats together and half-day retreats and like workshops. And so it it's been such a great experience. And when I was in Thailand, I also got to meet other entrepreneurs as well. And through that experience, like you realize that sometimes you live in a little bubble where you feel, or at least I can speak for myself in my season before it, where like a lot of times I felt like I was the one who was doing things, everything different. Like things were just so different. And my friends used to always say to me, wow, like you do all these different things. But like when I went there, I realized that I was the norm, like, you know, and it, in a way, like that felt good to see that, like, you know, I can actually have conversations with people where people didn't just think, oh, you do things so differently. In fact, it was like, well, how can we support each other and grow together because we're on the same journey? And it just felt so good. And not to say that like you don't want to make friends who are different, but like it's also really great to meet people who are on that same journey and like, you know, on the same page and same wavelength as you.
So you can share your stories, your journey, and
Yeah.
feel like someone can relate to what you're going through as well, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And I think traveling in general opens your eyes to so many different experiences as well. So I do love traveling. I am someone who loves routine though, so sometimes it's hard for me, but it's learning to create a routine in the different places I'm in. So that's how I'm trying to travel for my next trip as well, to try to create some sort of routine in every single place I go to.
What would that routine look like?
So for me, the favorite place that I was in Thailand was when I spent a whole week in Koh Samui, and I would like go yoga and then go to Muay Thai. So every morning I would go to Muay Thai, and then in the evening I'll go to yoga, and then during the day I would just like work in the hotel, take out my laptop, work a bit, and then go try different restaurants. And that was like, even though it was like slightly different, but also kind of had some sort of routine to it, and it felt like it was just a change of environments, and I really enjoyed that.
That's really beautiful. And for people who want to also solo travel and meet other like-minded people, how did you do that in Thailand?
I think it's taking up activity. So when I went to Muay Thai, I would meet people who also was interested in similar things. When I was at yoga, then I made friends with the instructor there, connected with him on social media. It's doing activities that actually light yourself up as well, because if you're going to do those activities, you're bound to meet people who also share a similar interest.
So just as long as you're going out there and doing your best to meet new people, you're bound to meet someone that's on a similar journey.
Well, yeah, if you take on activities, like I think it's really important to know, don't go and do an activity that you don't enjoy. I mean, you can pick up something if you're trying to challenge yourself, but if you want to meet someone who shares the same passion and same interest as you, then you want to pick up something or take on something that you already are into. Like, for example, for me, I was already into martial arts because I worked from a martial arts gym for 4 years before. And so when you share common interests, it's a lot easier for you to have conversations and start conversations and make friends that way.
So you recently collaborated on a retreat as well. Can you share us a little bit about the process of doing that and what that was like?
Yeah, actually, that was quite a story in itself, because remember how I was talking about how my intention for Thailand was to meet and collaborate with people. So one of the girls that I met, Nicole, when I was on the pier heading onto the island for the business retreat, I actually bumped into her and I looked at her and she looked familiar because I've seen her on Instagram. And I said, because I knew who was coming onto the retreat. So I was like, are you Nicole? And she's like, yeah. And then so we connected, had a quick chat, and within 5 minutes, she said, I'm actually running a retreat in Byron Bay, and I was looking for a yoga teacher, but I was really trying to look for someone I felt aligned to, and I haven't been able to find one. Would you be interested? And within 5 minutes of meeting, I was like, yeah, what's the dates? And I just saved it, and then we locked in a collaboration even before we actually arrived on the island for the retreat. And so that was like a testimony of like when you set an intention of what you want out of something, then you actually, like, life just brings it to you in some way. And so only 2 weeks ago, yeah, we went on the Byron Bay retreat. It was amazing. So it was called Fun Freedom Flow. And basically, it's a retreat for women who wants to run their business from a place of flow and alignment. Because a lot of times people think that you need to run your business from a place of hustle. A lot of like masculine energy, and there's nothing wrong with running it that way if that feels aligned for you. But for a lot of people, that doesn't feel aligned. And so that that retreat really supported people in finding what feels aligned for them, what was their flow, and tap into their flow to run their business. And it was just like so aligned to how I ran my business. It was really hard for me to find a coach that I wanted to collaborate with, because a lot of coaches didn't necessarily teach their methodology in a way that felt aligned to me. And so for me to also find someone that I felt so aligned with, so that I could teach yoga and also inner work and somatic work in a way that could align with their methodology, was actually not easy to find. And so like that story in itself was just like amazing. And so the retreat was amazing. Nicole's running another one next year as well, and I'm going to be collaborating with her next year, so I'm really excited for that.
Wow. And for people who are listening to this, are nodding and going, I can sense that I'm in my masculine energy and I want to be more aligned to my feminine energy in terms of work, what advice would you have for them?
I think it's finding what your own core values are, because everyone's different. And when you are functioning from a place that aligns to your core values, you naturally feel in flow. And I think a lot of times, if the hustle doesn't feel aligned to you, you need to ask yourself why you are taking that approach. Is there like a limiting belief that unless you hustle, you won't be successful? And because if you buy into that limiting belief, then you only find ways to confirm that truth, right? But if you want to buy into a belief that I can actually have a fun lifestyle, travel, and doing something I enjoy, and also attract my dream clients that way, then guess what? You're going to find evidence to prove that belief, and you're going to find creative ways to make that true. And so whatever your belief system is, your actions follow. And so I think it's questioning what is the belief that you buying into to make you hustle so hard.
Wow. Tell us a little bit about your life before you went into corporate, because you've done quite a few years as a yoga and Pilates instructor. What was that like? And what made you decide to then do what you're doing now, since you've had so much experience doing what you did previously as an instructor?
So in the beginning of my teaching journey, I was traveling to a lot of different locations, and a lot of people can relate to this if you're in the wellness industry, where you're constantly trying to pack up back-to-back classes or clients and trying to fill your schedule with clients, and you get so exhausted, but you're still not making that much money. And the only way to really make more money is either to pack out even more clients or to increase your prices. And so I think that when you have that belief that that is the only way to make money as an instructor, then you're only going to look for ways to support that truth, like we said earlier, right? And now what I do is I teach wellness entrepreneurs how to scale their business online. And so I support them in being creative of all these different options that they can access and is available to them already. And so back then I didn't understand all these different methodologies. I remember just seeing a lot of like influencers, huge following, and selling their own service. So I thought, oh, maybe if I grow my social media following, then I'm going to have a lot of clients, right? And I remember taking 2 years, build up to around 10,000 followers, and said, well, if I have 10,000 followers, now I should have a lot of clients. But no, I didn't have a lot of clients, and my business wasn't growing. And so I asked myself, did followers really mean a successful business? And it didn't seem like the case back then. And so I felt like I was a fraud. Like I had all these followers, but I wasn't able to convert them into clients. And so my Instagram just turned into more like a personal blog for me. It was just something that I enjoyed, and I continued to build that as my personal brand. And then fast forward to building my yoga business. I met my business partner on Instagram, actually. And then she said, hey, let's start a yoga business together. We ran an online yoga channel for 4 years. Loved it. We got interviewed by all these different podcasts and on the news, and we were featured on Yoga Journal. We didn't even realize we were featured on Yoga Journal. Actually, one of our friends was at the airport, and then she bought I don't know if she bought the journal or whether she just found the magazine, and then she opened it and she's like, oh my goodness, I saw you inside. And to be featured on the top basically yoga magazine, we were like, wow, we really made it. Financially we were still not doing amazing. So it really shows that you can have the best branding or externally it can look so good, but it doesn't necessarily mean. But I guess it also depends, what does success mean for you? How do you define success? Is it just having a successful brand, or is it financial? And for me back then, success for me was to make a certain amount of money. And because I had that story that unless I made this much money, I wasn't successful, it trapped me in this loop of constantly feeling like I'm still not there yet, which is not true, because for a lot of people, for them, it's just doing what they're passionate about. And that is what I truly believe now, is doing what I'm passionate about and living a lifestyle that I love is success for me. But back then it wasn't the case. And so I felt very defeated. And then when COVID hit, I lost all my corporate gigs, had to cancel our retreat, to cancel all our like workshops. And so a huge chunk of our income disappeared. And so that's why I decided that I had to do something different. And my business partner suggested that I go into corporate. And so that's how I ended up in corporate for those 2 years.
Wow. It seems like you've overcome a lot of limiting beliefs over this time in order to become the person you are today. What were the ones that were most pivotal to your growth and journey towards abundance?
Yeah. So when I came out of corporate, I want to go back a little bit just because like I wanted to explain how I realized I needed to work through my limiting beliefs to begin with. So I decided that I wanted to coach yoga teachers at first because I was like, oh, well, I know social media and I'm a yoga teacher. What if I help yoga teachers with social media? Like it seems to make a lot of sense, right? And then when I was working with yoga teachers, I realized that I had the strategies, but a lot of times people weren't executing on it. And I would give them homework or like I was mentoring them and giving them tasks and strategy, but then they'll come back with all these limiting beliefs. And I'm like, I don't know how to help them work through this. And so I sought out a coach myself and then decided to get trained to become a coach. And as I was doing the course, when I was learning the strategies of how to coach other people out of their limiting beliefs, you actually have to work through a lot of your own ones before you can support other people. And I did realize how much limiting beliefs I had myself. And what I found was that money stories were one of the biggest ones. We all have money stories, like, like from how we were brought up, like how our primary carers talked about money. It's ingrained into how we see money as well. And then the work, like the amount of work you put into to be able to make money. So my story was that you have to work hard to make money. And I guess for most of us, that's the story that we bought into. And I remember one of my coaches telling me to write on a piece of paper that money comes to me easily and effortlessly, and just stick it on my mirror and to see it every day. And it felt so uncomfortable at first. I'm like, how does money come to me easily and effortlessly? But it was just funny. Every morning I would look at it and I would repeat it to myself. And the more I saw it, the more I was like, oh, okay, well, like, let me explore how that looks like in my life. And as I started to explore that, I became creative with how I allowed money to flow to me easily and effortlessly. It was just like so interesting. Sometimes things are happening, but you don't even recognize it because you don't choose to believe it as well. And then that was a huge one for me. I also had some limiting beliefs about, what success had to look like for me. And a lot of that was tied to money as well. And part of my story was that I came from a family where my parents did a lot of volunteer work when we were young. And so at one point we were even living in commission housing. So we didn't have a lot of money growing up. And so there was a lot of limiting stories around money and success. And I told myself growing up, I didn't want to ever rely on, people donating or giving money to me for me to be able to pay the bills, because that's how my parents were like when I was young. But they were very grateful for that because they said money always came in just when we needed it. And so they were grateful, but I saw it as giving your power away, And so I wanted to take back my power to constantly create that income and to have that predictability of income. But then now I've really surrendered that, and to just be like, what if I was so okay? And this doesn't align with everyone, but for me, it feels really aligned to just not know exactly when money always came in, but trusted that money always came in when I needed it. And to be honest, the past few months, I have been surrendering to that. And it's been a very, very fun journey to see how things unfold and to see that, whenever I needed it, it always was there to support me. So, yeah.
Oh my goodness. Wow. How have you allowed yourself to surrender and become so aligned to energy and being in receiving mode?
It's funny because I got this new tattoo in Thailand. It said surrender. And it was a huge thing for me because I was like, what does it look like to really, truly surrender? And I realized for me, and maybe some people can resonate, is to actually be detached. When you're not attached to the results. Like being okay with, I would desire this and I trust the process, but I'm okay if things turn out differently. And when you detach to how it has to look like, then you're actually surrendering. And so it's like, it doesn't mean that you don't desire to improve or want certain things. And so, for example, it's that, like, like sometimes I would pray, oh, I would love to have this, but I trust the process of, if it's not this, it's something better. And whatever is right for me will fall into my lap. And just trust that process and just see how it plays out. Almost play it like a game. It's like, oh, let's have fun and see what life will unravel and give me this month, you know?
Wow. So you're in the energy of fun, curiosity, and just seeing what can happen. But how about people who are like, I'm not sure if I can pay the rent this month?
Mm.
How what would you say to people like
And I have experienced that before. You know, there has been times where like I've had unexpected bills come in, or like I have to pay this tax bill that I didn't even realize I had to pay. Because to be very honest, I'm not very good with like knowing my numbers, and so sometimes I'll be like, oh my goodness, I have this tax bill that I'm owing. Like, had no idea. And then, but every time something comes in, I I realize that you can choose to be anxious, which doesn't actually solve anything, right?
mm-hmm.
Or you can be like, oh, this is the reality of it. How can I creatively make that income? And I think also this being resourceful is so powerful as well, because when you know that you can always be resourceful, it places you in a position of empowered
Yeah.
living. And so like sometimes I'll be like, oh well, I can tell myself I can't pay this bill, or you can tell yourself, oh, how can I pay this? Like,
Wow.
and if you ask yourself that, then you go, okay, let's get creative. I remember so clearly there was one day I like just took out some paper and I was just writing. I'm like, okay, well, this week I'd love to get creative with how to make some extra income. You know, like what are all the different ways I can do that? And so I just like writing, getting creative and writing all these things. And I'm like, well, I can run a workshop like this week. And I was like, oh, but I don't have time this week. I'm like, the only time slot I have is in 2 days. I'm like, do I have time to promote that workshop? And I'm like, well, I can just do an online one. Like, if it flops, it flops. What's the worst case scenario, right? So I was like, okay, let's do it. And then the funny thing is, like, on that workshop, I was teaching how to get creative with making money while I was doing it myself. At that time, I was like, well, I can teach exactly what I'm doing right now. If it's a success, then I have a point to prove, right? And then like I had people hop onto that call, and then I made an extra like you know $100 to $200 just from that like 1 hour session. I'm like,
wow.
that was just, it wasn't a whole lot of money, but it was to prove a point that I
Yes.
can get creative whenever I feel like it, and I can always do that at any time. It was just to prove a point so that every time you do something, it reinforces a belief that you have. And so even if it's at a small scale, like maybe this time I just made an extra like $150, but next time maybe I make 300 and then 500 and then 1,000, you know, 10,000, and it just keeps building on that belief. And then so anytime you feel like, but I don't have money, you'll be like, that's a limiting belief. I can always create more income if I want to.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so inspiring. You've shared some really inspiring ways how we can change our mindset, be more open to opportunities, to be creative, how we can access financial abundance, and to live a life that's more aligned to our values. What would you like to share with others as a lesson, or perhaps something to your younger self that you think would help them?
I think one of the biggest lessons that I've learned is to allow myself to work on my inner work first before I see the external reward in some way, where I believe that I had to achieve something external for me to feel a certain way before. But that's just a lie that keeps perpetuating, that doesn't go anywhere. Because if you think that something external that you achieve can actually give you something that you desire internally, you're always going to be left disappointed. And it's a very disempowered way to live, because you are outsourcing your happiness, outsourcing what you really want. But what if you can actually already feel happy with what you have, be content, and get to that place of just true contentment and alignment? And then from that place, everything you do is just simply an extension of what's already overflowing from within you. Then that's such a beautiful place to live in, because you can't lose, right? Because whether you're, then you can really surrender your external goals. Because when you're attached to that goal and how it needs to look like, because you're attached to it because your happiness is reliant on it. But you can be detached if you're already in a good place. And so my advice for my younger self and to anyone listening or watching is that get yourself into a good place internally first. And from that place, everything is just an extension of that.
You know, we hear people say that, but and I am also currently experiencing this. Do you have a way to verbalize how that looks like, how to move into that state?
There's a lot of different methods that you can access that, but one of a very simple way that I personally do it just on a regular basis is to actually slow it down first and to check in to see the things that I'm trying to look for or seek for to feel. Maybe it's a sense of freedom or a sense of safety or love, and just to slow down and to notice, do I already have this available to me now? Because a lot of things that we're seeking is actually very spiritual experiences. And I actually made this video yesterday about this, that like all the things that we desire is actually spiritual experiences, you know, like freedom, security, safety. These are spiritual experiences. Yet we have this false impression or this like story we tell ourselves that, oh, if I make that amount of money, I'm going to feel safe. Or if I have this relationship, then I'm going to feel security. Or if I have that, then I will feel. But the thing is, those things don't give you those things. And so that's why you left disappointed. But what if you can actually acknowledge, okay, how do I feel freedom right now? How do I already feel safe? Can what I have be already enough? And when you can tap into that and experience that, then you really feel freedom. Then you really feel safe and secure. And then whether you reach those goals or not, that's just a bonus. That's an add-on. It's not, if I don't have it, then I won't feel this way.
So what if they don't feel that right now? What if they don't feel safe or secure?
Mm.
So are you saying that they should find elements in their life, like any, no matter how big or small it is, to embrace that first?
I think it's also the definition of what we, because it takes time to rewire your minds and what stories you place on that specific word, right? Like, what does freedom mean? And some people, it's like, no, freedom has to feel this specific way. But it's like, okay, what if you opened yourself to feeling freedom right now? What would that feel like? And I do a lot of somatic work with my clients to help them feel into their body. What does freedom feel like in the body, like physically? And when they can actually acknowledge and recognize that, like, freedom is actually a sensation and an experience more than something that they believed it means, they need to take away the story first and feel it
Oh
in
my
their
God.
body.
Wow.
And when you feel that, you realize that actually freedom is available. If you just pause to think about it, in a lot of times in our life, like, we experience freedom in different ways. Sometimes, like for me, it's when I'm sitting around in nature, I feel freedom. Like, it's when I am feeling what's beyond myself, you know?
Yes.
And
Yes.
so, like, maybe certain environments help you tap into that better. And when you can recognize that, maybe place yourself in those environments more so that you can learn to access that more, because it's very available to us. But it's when we're in an environment that doesn't allow us to access it, it's very hard. Like, if we're always in a corporate environment, I say corporate, but like, there's great corporate environments, but like, as in, sometimes when we're in the work environment that doesn't light us up or spark joy, it's very hard for us to feel freedom in that moment. Then why don't you change your environment for a moment, help yourself tap into it, and then realize how available it is to you at any time? Then you can detach your goal from that word that you have labeled as freedom or safety or security, because those things aren't actually attached to your end goal. It's attached to a feeling, a sensation that you can feel that's beyond yourself.
So you're saying first we must hone in on that sensation in our body. It almost sounds like we're kind of meditating on that feeling in order to grow that feeling that's already available within us. And once we are within alignment to that feeling or that energy or that state of being, then we are able to embody that and then provide that externally and see that. Okay.
Yeah. So for those who need an example, like, for example, like, if I attach like safety to maybe like amount of money that I'm making, right? And I really struggle to feel safety right now because I can't pay the bills. That's very practical, right?
Yes.
So, like, how I would do it, I would slow it down. I would meditate. What does safety feel like in my body? What would it feel like if I was to feel safe right now? And then bring myself to that place where I actually feel it in my body. And then once I can feel it, then I go, okay, this is so available. Even though nothing has changed in the external, I already have access to it. That is reinforcing your new belief that you don't need that amount of money for you to feel safe. And every time you access it, it reinforces. Because I think a lot of people try to create abundance from a place of scarcity, but that's not how it works. You need to actually have the existing abundance for you to create more abundance. Scarcity doesn't create abundance. So yeah, you have to actually have it inside first. Yeah.
Well, thank you for so many transformational pieces of knowledge that you share with us, Alyssa. I'm so grateful that you shared everything that you've learned with us today. I think it's going to be very transformational to people who are listening to this. She also has a YouTube channel, Alyssa Mac, so I will link it here, the YouTube name. Thank you so much, Alyssa.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.